So, whatever happened to all of those wonderful robotic pieces of art from the movies and TV shows we loved so much back in the day, passionately tinkered together by the fans and die-hard robot builders over the past 30 years? Let's find out. Movies,
Music and monsters.
Hey my friends, Dan Monroe here talking about movies, music, and monsters. Well, my friends, this is one of those shows that I've been just chomping at the bit to do ever since I started this channel, a show solely dedicated to all the guys and gals out there building and constructing their very own lost in space robots, along with other robots as well, of course. And okay, granted, this video is going to be a little bit different than most of the other ones that I do, which are specifically talking about movies and TV shows, but nevertheless, I'm pretty sure you're going to find it not only extremely interesting and fascinating, but super fun as well. So, grab your power pack, your fiberglass torso, and your favorite Dremel tool with a bucket of stale popcorn, and let's dive in. Well, finally, a show dedicated to me, the greatest sci-fi robot ever made.
Enjoy your moment in the sun, Bubble Breath, but just remember who came first. You are simply the poor TV cousin. Started in black and white, no less. The very idea.
Ever since the mid to late 1960s, when science fiction robots began appearing in comic books, movies, and TV shows, kids and fans of the genre have been doing their best to tinker together robots of their own. I mean, okay, having a dog is fine, but having your very own robot, now that's something entirely different. And when it comes specifically to the Lost in Space robot here, literally created over 60 years ago by the brilliant designer Robert Kinoshita, I'm pretty sure there's been way more people than you think who attempted, over the years, to reproduce this super cool icon of American science fiction television history. Did you hear that, Blobby? Super cool science fiction icon.
Icons. Don't get me started on those dudes. They set the hobby back 10 years and gave good and true builders a black eye. Surely you jest.
Not icons, replicas, science fiction icon. And don't call me Shirley. Anyway, these days in 2025, there's literally hundreds and hundreds of people making their very own Lost in Space robots in their homes, in their garages,
and outhouses.
Good folks all over the world sharing their love for this little bug. But 30 years ago, when I started having an interest in building my robot, that certainly was not the case, I can tell you that. In fact, back then, around the mid to late 1990s, there were only a very small handful of people who were talented and dedicated enough to even attempt such an enormous project without the current day pleasures and shortcuts of 3D scanning and printing. Nope, just good old-fashioned blood, sweat, and robotic tears trying desperately to end up with their very own cybernetic hero from Lost in Space. I am a cybernetic hero.
More like a cybernetic zero. My built-in directives don't permit me to inflict harm to a rational being. But since you're as irrational as a bloop...
Now, to fully understand the history of Lost in Space robot building, we gotta go back, way back to the 1980s when everything more or less started. There was a book published by a gentleman named Flint Mitchell called You Can Build the Lost in Space Robot. Well, I very rapidly acquired a copy of that book and studied every page with overly enthusiastic attention. It It was a really cool book to have. It didn't really tell you exactly how to do it, but it just showed you, more or less, how he did it. And the book also featured master robot builder John Rigg on the cover, who pioneered many B-9 building robot techniques and also fathered many early Robbie replicas as well. Now, without having any authentic studio blueprints whatsoever to work with, it was maybe another year until I finally landed copies of the actual studio blueprints, but as it turned out, they were more or less just a guide for the Fox property masters to go by. What was made versus what was drawn were two entirely different things altogether. However, the tread section blueprints were totally accurate to what was actually built. Just having those prints was completely awesome, and I remember that's what started me off spending 12 hours a day in the garage cutting plywood and styrene plastic to at least get the tread section underway. Interesting fact, Robert Kinoshita, who we'll discuss later, of course designed both Robbie and B-9.
Daddy, I miss you.
Deal with it, loser.
Dad always did like you best.
Anyway, as I was saying, Kinoshita had drawn so many concepts for Robbie for Forbidden Planet that MGM just couldn't include them all in his final design. In fact, whatever MGM didn't incorporate into Robbie was implemented in B-9 over here 10 years later.
So you see, Robot, you are really Tuesday night leftovers. Corn, beef, and hash. You must be so proud.
Back to the build. Now we come to Fred Barton. You have heard me talk about Fred numerous times. You can't be a B-9 robot builder or robot enthusiast in general and not heard of, or at least have a part of your B-9 that Fred didn't make. He's built and licensed so many famous movie robots over the years, including an amazing animatronic Robbie, RoboCop, both Battlestar Galactica Cylons, and also partnered with Sideshow Collectibles and Lucasfilm for a production run of R2-D2 and C-3PO.
Hey, what about me?
We'll get to that. Keep your bubble on. Anyway, in 1974, Fred was in high school and had already built his first walking Robbie suit and restored the actual screen, used Robbie the robot himself, but a year later, he made an acquaintance of an individual who also shared the same passion of robot building, and get this guy actually obtained the original B-9 robot as a college project and was allowed to borrow the actual hero robot costume, which was on display at Marine Land of the Pacific in Palos Verdes, California. And to make a long story short,
way too late for that now.
Fred's friend molded the original hero torso, which Fred then completely retooled himself, and that, my friends, is where the modern age of accurate B-9 building really got started. One of the very first decent torsos ever made was actually sculpted by a guy named Bill Hughes, and then later on tweaked by Doug Hines, lovingly being known throughout the years as the Doug Hines torso. And before the original robot torso castings got out there, this was really about all there was. And honestly, everything from the waist down can be more or less made from wood and pipe insulation from your local Home Depot.
Yes, pipe insulation and particle board. People had the option of either making a B-9 robot or a septic system for Aunt Martha.
Well, when you gotta go, you gotta go.
So many amazing people did so much great work back in the day. One of the very earliest builders that I ever saw even attempt this project, completely 100% scratch built for a television commercial, was a gentleman from Australia named Lewis Morley. Up to that point, I was building my robot out of poster board and sheet metal, but here was a guy who made a very good-looking robot completely from scratch, and man, I gotta tell you, that was certainly not only impressive, but showed me that if someone all the way on the other side of the world can build a robot, maybe I could too. Now, jumping ahead to right around 1995, everything changed with the introduction of this little-known entity called the Internet. The robot building frenzy was about to begin. It was at that time that I found out about Fred and immediately purchased not only his torso, but also his fiberglass radar section. Fred was selling parts, many of which were recast by other builders and sellers, but he was essentially the first incarnation of the B-9 Builders Club, and, of course, there were other great builders selling parts at the time. Doug Hines sold me my neon mouth and backing plate along with a set of really cool fiberglass cast wrists. One of Fred's original customers, a guy named Dewey Howard. I think I got my torso hooks and bubble lifter from him. So many other super cool builders like Mike Joyce, Craig Rhinebeck, Will Huff, Eugene Booz, Mark Thompson, Bill Hedges, Greg Lug, the amazingly talented John Rigg, and so many more. We could literally be here all day.
Surely by this point, someone was officially licensing these B-9 robots, right?
Well, actually, yes, and don't call me Shirley. The history of these officially licensed robots, for the most part, can only be described as an absolute freaking nightmare, beginning in the late 1990s with Icon's replicas, a very sore subject to be sure, to coincide with the release of the Lost in Space movie by New Line Cinema in 1998. I very specifically remember seeing an ad in a magazine for one of their robots, thinking to myself, oh my god, someone is doing it, I can't believe it. Icon's replicas began procuring licenses for all kinds of robots and other props, not just the Lost in Space robot, but pretty much anything he could get his hands on at the time. They began creating one-to-one scale B-9 robot replicas, with over 100 replicas being ordered by customers at prices ranging from between $18,000 up to $25,000. But Icons was putting on the appearance of making multiple units when, in actuality, they were simply taking people's money, buying more licenses and delivering next to nothing. One or two robots were delivered to irate customers, and the rest of the people who ordered these robots, and there were plenty, lost everything. Thousands of dollars of which were never recouped. Tons of litigation was filed against Icons. The disgraced company went out of business, of course, and the remainder of their robot parts just got sold off to individual buyers, and more than likely, parts and products were given in lieu of payment to the employees or just sold off through eBay auctions.
Wow, really unfortunate that so many people lost so much money with that company. I feel somehow responsible.
In this case, Blinky, you were duped like the rest of the robot buying public. Let go of your guilt, brother. I set you free.
Then came Classics Reborn, a company run by two guys named Dave Gilda and Dave McDowell, hoping to pick up the pieces after Icon's replicas failed so badly. Basically, nothing ever materialized beyond the initial planning stages, although they did end up selling some individual parts like the power pack, rubber arms, and the collar section.
Wow, big business at its best. It seems you were the ruination of many a company.
Who would have ever thought that such a beloved and cherished sci-fi hero as myself could ever be any kind of an issue?
If you have an issue, here's a tissue.
And, of course, in the midst of all this, we still had Fred Barton, who, in the mid-2000s, was approached by 20th Century Fox executive producer Kevin Burns, offering Fred a license to produce full-size B-9 robots. And since Fred was already doing really great work with his other robot replicas, he seemed the logical choice, and it came so close. Kevin and Fred had a contract all drawn up. They'd worked together on some of Kevin's shows, and it looked like everything was going to be moving forward with flying colors until suddenly, literally at the 11th hour, Kevin came back to the table with a list of contractual changes and demands, like getting 3 free robots out of the deal for himself, as well as an astronomical guaranteed minimum for overall sales in a 2-year period. So, in the end, that whole deal just sort of, shall we say, got lost in space. Then there was another company, a really great established company called Manatron, which was actually a real robotics and automation company. They tried to secure a license through Kevin Burns, offering robots in 3 different tiers of functionality, and from what I understand, they built 5 really magnificent robots, sold all 5, and then for whatever reason, I don't honestly know the details, as Kevin died a few years ago, and there's nobody left at Manatron that was related to the deal. Again, another company succumbs to the B-9 production curse. Kevin Burns shut them down.
Kevin Burns strikes again.
Okay, hold on. I am not bashing Kevin Burns. I knew Kevin personally, and yes, he was a very shrewd businessman. Difficult, some might say, but he was a huge Lost in Space fan, and when you got to know him, he was a really super fun guy. If anything, he was the guy who was solely responsible for putting Lost in Space back in the forefront in the late 1990s with classic toys and model licensing, working with Sheila Allen to have the original shows beautifully released on Blu-ray, keeping the cast working with live appearances, and creating some great shows like The Fantasy Worlds of Irwin Allen and Lost in Space Forever. So, even though life didn't always shine the brightest light on Kevin, he was in the end extremely important to the entire Irwin Allen legacy.
Well said, my friend. Well said.
I also fondly remember all the times my phone would ring with the Kevin Burns number on the screen, thinking, oh boy, here we go. I know I'm going to get yelled at for at least 5 minutes about something, and then we'll spend the next hour talking and laughing about ridiculous Lost in Space stuff, really super cool memories, and I do miss the guy.
Me too. After all, he was the one who initially rescued me from 20th Century Fox back in the day. Better him than the janitor.
He did indeed, finding you on the back lot of Fox in 1989, horrified to find out that you looked nothing like you did in the show due to the Mystery Island alterations, so he had master model builder Greg Jean semi-restore the original prop, along with creating a second robot for Kevin with the intention of touring this duplicate robot rather than the precious original, which, yes, wasn't really so original anymore, but he looked good, so yes, even Kevin Burns was involved with good old-fashioned robot building. Well, at least he commissioned someone else to do it. And yet the story continues with yet another robot builder obtaining an official license. Super nice and super talented guy named Mike Joyce, creating a company called B-9 Creations with a license from Kevin Burns and Synthesis Entertainment. He was authorized to build up to, I think, 250 replicas using the original molds and archived designs, ensuring museum-grade accuracy, and these things were gorgeous with partially motorized parts and flashing neon. Mike completed and delivered 52 or 53 of his 250 goal, I think. Great job, and then just stopped. B-9 overload, some would say, but I would imagine it would be quite the ordeal just to keep up with all the orders, and this is awesome. Mike Joyce was also instrumental in formalizing the B-9 robot Robot Builders Club into an officially licensed affiliate in 2003, due in part to his relationship at the time with Kevin Burns.
Ah, yes, the B-9 Robot Builders Club, still going strong to this day. B-9 parts, brains, and bubbles. Get your B-9 parts here. Beat it, kid, you bother me.
I even sold my officially licensed CDs of your voice way back in the day, the Robot Ramblings 3 CD set.
Robot Ramblings, indeed. Sounds exactly like what we need to deal with just about every time Robot opens his mouth on this show. The CD set should have been called Robot Diarrhea.
Bite me.
And believe it or not, the official B-9 robot licensing does continue today in 2025 with Doug Hines and his company Gotham Cruisers once again creating full-sized and fully licensed Lost in Space robots. And what would Lost in Space robot building be without the wonderful guys over at the B-9 Robot Builders Club, an online community that sells parts, has reference photos and blueprints page after page, literally dedicated to any particular part of the robot, along with who is supplying those parts for that section. These guys are still around today, and I was fortunate enough to meet many of them in person at several conventions here on the East Coast in the late 1990s and early 2000s. Fantastic guys, fantastic builders. It was so much freaking fun to go to all of the conventions with the B-9 Robot Builders Club members selling their parts, putting up their incredible robots, hanging out with members of the Lost in Space cast like Mark Goddard and even Bobby May, the guy inside the robot. Super incredible talented guys. So much freaking fun. And speaking of officially licensed, we've all been waiting for this one, and here it is, the officially sanctioned, fully licensed art poster celebrating the 60th anniversary of Lost in Space by Ron Gross. This is a newly tweaked and upgraded version of a classic, now 16 by 24 inches with a surface area 75% larger than Ron's earlier poster offerings. Pre-orders are now being accepted, only $39.95, with fulfillment beginning in mid-September. Quantities are limited, so don't miss this one. Link in the description.
Okay, but since Kevin Burns has passed, whatever happened to all of the original robot parts and molds from the original show? I'll never tell.
Well, back in 2023, Heritage Auctions sold off at astronomical prices most of everything that was left from Kevin Burns' collection that had to do with our pal the robot here, including all of the original stone molds for the body, the legs, and the arms, the original hero brain that was in the robot for all 3 seasons of the show, interestingly spray-painted white because it was white for the Mystery Island alterations, the original knees, and completed tread sections. Absolutely amazing to see original blueprints, some extra castings of original arms, and even, so the auction claimed, the original mouth from the hero robot.
Wait a minute. If all of these original robot parts were sold at an auction, what the heck was still original on the hero robot that he sold for a whole ton of money?
Let's just say that I'd hate to be the guy that spent all that money on that original prop. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that today, in 2025, that things are any easier when it comes to building our mechanical friend here.
Actually, it is easier. Way easier.
Okay, I suppose you're right. With all the 3D printing technology and free shareware, it's literally taken the robot building community by storm. I appreciate the technology, and I understand that it's probably a little more cost-effective and certainly more lightweight.
Try leaving your 3D printed B-9 in the sun. That printed carcass of his will soften, warp, and melt. like the id monster going through Krell metal. I'm melting, I'm melting. Oh, what a world, what a world.
I don't know, call me old-fashioned, but I like to have a robot that was built out of the same materials, more or less, that the original was built from almost 60 years ago, with all the fiberglass and old-school 1960s bulbs. Again, LED bulbs work great and certainly last longer, but to me, nothing looks quite as good as the old incandescent flashing bulbs. I don't know, it's just me. I'm old, but I like my robot to not be 100% perfect, not 100% symmetrical, because the original robot clearly wasn't, and that was his charm. Some builders like that perfect action figure look, but in reality, he was very quickly made back in the day in like 6 weeks by people hired to rapidly construct a prop for a TV show.
And boy, does it show. Clearly, the people assembling this 5-gallon barrel of poop were either hungover from the night before or completely blind.
Well, you don't see any Robbie Builders clubs around, do you?
Many have tried.
They tried and failed?
They tried and died.
The spice must flow.
Well, my friends, there you have it, the interesting, yet somewhat discombobulated history of Lost in Space robot building. I just thank the maker that people like Fred Barton, John Rigg, Craig Reinbeck, Mike Joyce, the late Kevin Burns, and all the other old schoolers who put in so much time solely for the love of these amazing robots. By the way, Fred Barton is the guy who is primarily responsible for coming up with all the super fun dialogue between our robot friends here over the last few months. So I've decided it's only fitting to give Fred a co-producer credit on the show, which certainly does add quite a bit to all the episodes. So, Robbie, what do you think of that?
Oh, the pain, the pain.
Robot building by enthusiastic fans over the years has not only become a lucrative business in some respects, but also helps keep the memory of these wonderful robots alive in the hearts and minds of future generations, masterfully built with both love and dedication to the craft, paying homage to all the amazing robot movies, both past and present, including The Day the Earth Stood Still, Forbidden Planet, Battlestar Galactica, Buck Rogers in the 25th Century, Silent Running, Tobor the Great, Star Wars, and so many more. We could be here all day, but I really hope you guys enjoyed that deep dive all about Lost in Space robot building, and if you did, and you like this kind of stuff, please consider subscribing to the channel. I've got a whole bunch of new videos coming up really soon that I know you guys are just gonna dig.
And if you'd like to help support the channel, you can always buy us a coffee. Link in the description.
And please feel free to stop back anytime as we together continue the conversation on movies, music, and monsters.
Movies, music, and monsters.